In the heart of an ancient forest, where the wind seems to carry hidden secrets and the mist never fully releases its grip, a small red fox emerged at dusk. Her fur was tangled and stained with mud and dried blood, and her eyes shimmered with a fragile mix of fear and resilience. Every step appeared to be a struggle against nature itself, as if the animal understood she stood on the thin boundary between survival and silent disappearance. She had not chosen this place by chance. Twisted trees held invisible memories, and the damp ground seemed to breathe in rhythm with her trembling body. In the distance, a human sound broke the silence. Cautious footsteps, a soft whisper. A presence that was neither clearly threatening nor entirely safe. The fox froze, torn between instinct to flee and an unexplained urge to stay. Then something unexpected happened. Instead of running, she allowed herself to be seen. There was vulnerability in her gaze, but also an ancient strength that few humans truly recognize in wild animals. The encounter was brief, almost sacred. No words were spoken, only a silent understanding between two species separated by thousands of years of evolution. After that moment, the fox vanished into the deep darkness of the forest, like a spirit dissolving among the trees. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years, and the wilderness continued to breathe without revealing her fate. For the person who saw her that night, only unanswered questions remained. Did she survive? Did she find her path? Or was she swallowed by an unforgiving winter? Then, on an unexpected afternoon, when the wind carried the familiar scent of rain and wet leaves, movement appeared between the trunks. A recognizable glow shimmered in the shadows, not as coincidence, but as return. The fox had come back, and her presence felt like a message the forest itself had not yet fully revealed. The story you are about to hear is not simply about an injured fox limping through a misty forest. Above all, it is a meditation on memory, survival, and the silent bond that can sometimes arise between humans and wild animals, even when neither intends to create it. In nature, nothing truly happens by accident. Every encounter, every gesture of care, and every farewell leaves invisible traces that can echo for years. Ancient forests hold countless stories that rarely reach us. Many lives pass unseen, and many connections fade before they are ever understood. Yet from time to time, something extraordinary occurs. An animal returns, a familiar gaze emerges, and the past resurfaces as if it never disappeared. This is one of those stories, told slowly, respectfully, and with attention to the subtle details that make the natural world feel vividly alive. Throughout this video, you will follow the fox's journey from her moment of vulnerability to her unexpected return, witnessing how time transforms both the wilderness and those who observe it. Each chapter will reveal new layers of this path, inviting you to feel, imagine, and reflect alongside us. If you enjoy deep emotional narratives about wild animals, mystery, and the quiet drama of nature, consider subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications so you don't miss our next stories. Your support helps us continue creating carefully researched content told with respect for wildlife and the environment. Also, please leave a like. It helps YouTube share this story with more people who love nature as much as you do. And in the comments, tell us which country and city you are watching from. Knowing where you are connects a global community of viewers who share the same fascination with the natural world. Now take a breath and settle in. The fox's journey is only beginning, and what it reveals about the forest and Johannes and about us may be deeper than it first appears. The forest is not merely a setting. It is a living organism that observes, reacts, and holds memories. That afternoon, the air was heavy, saturated with the smell of decaying leaves and recent rain. Tall trunks rose like silent pillars, and between them ran a constant whisper of wind that seemed to carry ancient stories. It was in this almost sacred environment that the fox appeared, small against the vastness around her, yet deeply connected to every sound and movement in her surroundings. Her body bore the marks of an invisible struggle. The once bright red fur was tangled and dirty, pressed against her skin by mud and dried blood. Every step seemed to demand enormous effort, as if her muscles were on the verge of giving up. Still, there was something steady in her posture, a quiet determination that refused complete surrender. As she stepped onto the damp ground, her paws sank slightly, leaving traces that were quickly swallowed by the dark soil. Small insects buzzed around her, indifferent to her pain. Above, branches creaked softly, moved by a breeze that carried the freshness of rain and the chill of the approaching dusk. The fox moved slowly, but not without purpose. Her senses were sharpened, her nose lifted, ears alert to every sound, eyes scanning each shadow between the trees. She knew that in that moment she was vulnerable, and that any mistake could mean the end of her journey. Then a different sound broke the natural harmony of the forest. Human footsteps, careful and restrained, echoed in the distance. They were neither hurried nor aggressive. They were cautious, almost respectful. The fox stopped immediately, her body tense like a drawn string, torn between the instinct to flee and an unexplainable curiosity. For a few seconds, time seemed suspended. The entire forest appeared to hold its breath alongside her. The human did not move closer abruptly. They remained still, watching from afar, aware of the fragility of that moment. No shouts, no sudden gestures, only shared silence. In that instant, something rare occurred. The fox allowed herself to be seen. Her eyes met the distant silhouette, and in that silent exchange, there seemed to be a mutual understanding. It was not full trust, but neither was it pure fear. It was a delicate balance between two species that rarely meet without conflict. The wind blew again, making leaves dance around both observers, human and animal. The fox inhaled deeply, sensing the scent of earth and life in the air. Even wounded, she remained an integral part of that ecosystem, connected to every tree, every sound, and every shadow. Moments later, gathering her remaining strength, the fox took a few steps back, slowly breaking eye contact. Without panicking or running wildly, she retreated between the trunks, as if she understood that this encounter was not an immediate threat. The forest welcomed her back, enveloping her in its protective darkness. When the human figure was left alone, only the murmur of the trees and the nearly erased tracks on the damp ground remained. The fox had vanished, but the feeling of that moment lingered in the air, like a silent omen that this story was far from over. After the fox retreated between the trunks, the forest seemed to shift in mood. The wind continued to blow, the leaves still trembled, and the birds resumed their calls, yet something remained different. As if the encounter had left an invisible mark in the very air. The human stayed motionless, aware that any sudden movement could shatter the fragile balance that had formed there. The silence was not empty. It was full of meaning. Each second seemed to stretch beyond ordinary time, as though nature itself were weighing what had just happened. The damp ground held the last traces of the fox's paw prints, already fading beneath the moisture and the light drizzle beginning to fall. From high in the canopy, raindrops slid slowly along the branches, following unpredictable paths until they reached the dark soil below. The soft sound of those drops blended with the distant rustle of leaves, creating a natural soundtrack that enveloped the entire scene. It felt as if the forest were breathing more deeply. The human, meanwhile, was torn between two opposing impulses, to move on and leave everything behind, or to try to understand more clearly what they had just witnessed. Still, they knew that approaching now would be pointless. The fox had already vanished, and any attempt to track her might only frighten her further. Somewhere hidden among the trees, the fox advanced slowly, guided by instinct and by an invisible map known only to her. Even wounded, she followed a familiar path, moving along ancient trails marked by generations of her kind. Each step was measured, each pause necessary. Pain still pulsed through her body, yet something stronger pushed her forward, the will to survive. Her senses remained razor-sharp, her nose picking up subtle scents of other animals, her ears catching sounds that would go unnoticed by any human. She was not merely a victim of the forest, she was part of it. At times, the fox stopped and glanced back, as if replaying the recent encounter in her mind. There was no obvious fear in those moments, but rather a quiet curiosity. Something about that human felt different from others she had encountered during her wild life. The rain began to intensify, turning the ground into thicker mud and making every movement more difficult. Small streams formed between roots and rocks, forcing the fox to choose her steps carefully. Still, she persisted, refusing to surrender to exhaustion. On the other side of the forest, the human finally took a few steps forward, but with extreme caution. They did not seek to capture, chase, or interfere, only to observe. They looked around, trying to imprint every detail of that place in their memory, as if sensing that this moment might never return. And so human and fox continued along separate paths, bound only by a silent encounter that neither could erase. The forest remained as a living witness to this fleeting connection, holding it within its twisted trunks, wet leaves, and eternal murmur. Though the meeting had ended, the story was far from over. Deep within the forest, where light filtered only in broken beams through the canopy, the fox followed an ancient trail shaped not by humans, but by generations of her kind. The path was subtle, barely visible to an untrained eye, marked by faint scents, worn earth, and the silent memory of countless paws that had passed before her. Even wounded, she moved with a quiet certainty, as though something beyond instinct was guiding her forward. The rain continued to fall in a steady rhythm, soft but persistent, soaking the ground and turning fallen leaves into dark, shimmering fragments. Each drop seemed to carry a whisper of the forest's history, reminding the fox that survival here demanded patience, awareness, and resilience. She paused occasionally, allowing her body brief moments of rest before pressing on. As she walked, the world around her felt both familiar and altered. The trees stood as ancient witnesses, their bark scarred by storms, time, and life itself. In their shadows, the fox sensed the presence of unseen creatures, predators, prey, and silent observers, all woven into the same delicate web of existence. Her injury slowed her, but it did not defeat her. Pain pulsed through her leg with each step, yet she adapted her movement, shifting her weight carefully, choosing firmer ground where possible. This was not the first hardship she had faced, nor would it be the last. Survival in the wild was a constant negotiation between strength and vulnerability. At one point, she reached a small clearing where the rain fell more freely from the sky. Here, the air felt different, lighter, almost sacred. The fox stopped, lifting her head and closing her eyes briefly, as if sensing something deeper beneath the surface of the moment. In that stillness, the memory of the human encounter flickered faintly in her awareness. The image of the distant silhouette returned, not as a threat, but as an echo. The human had not chased her, had not raised their voice, had not tried to dominate her space. This distinction lingered in her mind, subtle yet persistent, like a thread connecting two separate worlds. But the forest did not allow her to dwell too long on reflection. A rustling in the undergrowth snapped her attention back to the present. Instantly alert, her ears pivoted toward the sound, her body tense. Somewhere nearby, another animal moved, perhaps a rival, perhaps prey, or perhaps a silent watcher like herself. She resumed her journey, moving deeper into the shadows where the trees grew denser and the ground sloped downward toward a hidden stream. The scent of water grew stronger, mingled with the earthy aroma of moss and decay. This was a place she knew well, a place of refuge and renewal. As she approached the stream, the sound of flowing water filled the air, calm yet powerful. She paused at its edge, gazing at her own reflection distorted by ripples. In that moment, the forest seemed to mirror her condition. Wounded, but alive. Battered, but unbroken. Marked by struggle, yet still beautiful. The fox bent down to drink, letting the cold water soothe her thirst and cool her aching body. Above her, the rain continued its quiet descent, and around her, the forest breathed in steady harmony. Though her journey was far from over, this moment offered something precious. A reminder that even in pain, life persisted, and that somewhere ahead, her path would lead back toward the light. Night began to settle over the forest like a slow, inevitable tide. The sky darkened through the broken canopy, and the air grew colder, carrying the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves. The fox moved carefully along the stream's edge, her body tense yet composed, aware that darkness would soon transform the familiar landscape into something far more dangerous. As the light faded, sounds became sharper. The rustle of distant animals, the crack of a branch under unseen weight, and the steady murmur of water filled the air. Every vibration traveled through the forest like a pulse, reminding the fox that she was never truly alone, and that survival required constant vigilance. Her injury still throbbed, but the cold water had eased some of the burning pain. She paused occasionally, pressing her wounded leg against cool moss or damp soil, instinctively seeking relief. Each brief rest was a negotiation with her own body. Enough to endure, but not enough to invite danger. Along the stream bank, she encountered subtle signs of other lives. Claw marks on bark, flattened grass where an animal had passed, faint scents carried on the breeze. These were the quiet records of a living, moving world that never stopped, even when unseen. At one point, the fox stopped completely. Across the water, a pair of faint, glowing eyes appeared between the shadows of trees. They did not move closer, nor did they retreat. For a long moment, two silent observers measured each other across the dark ribbon of the stream. The tension hung thick in the air, but no attack came. Slowly, the distant figure vanished back into the forest, leaving only a ripple of uncertainty behind. The fox exhaled, not with relief, but with the calm acceptance that such encounters were simply part of her world. Moving on, she followed the stream deeper into the wilderness, where the trees grew taller and the darkness felt more ancient. Here, the forest seemed less forgiving, as though it tested every creature that dared to cross its hidden paths. Yet within this harshness, there was also beauty. Fireflies began to flicker faintly above the water, tiny sparks of light dancing against the night. Their glow reflected softly on the stream's surface, creating fleeting patterns that shimmered like forgotten memories. The fox paused once more, this time not out of pain, but contemplation. In the silence, the image of the human returned, distant, still, and strangely gentle. It lingered briefly, then faded like the firefly's light. As the night deepened, the fox curled herself beside the stream, choosing a sheltered spot beneath a fallen log. Rain drummed softly on leaves above, and the forest settled into its nocturnal rhythm. Wounded but alive, she rested, carrying with her the marks of struggle, the echo of an unlikely encounter, and the unspoken promise that her journey was far from finished. Dawn arrived slowly, as if the forest itself hesitated to wake. Pale light seeped through the canopy in fractured beams, illuminating drifting mist and beads of water clinging to leaves. The fox stirred beneath the fallen log, her breathing steady but shallow, her body still marked by fatigue and pain. For a brief moment, everything was still, suspended between night and day. As the first birds began to sing, their voices echoed softly through the trees. The stream continued its quiet flow, carrying with it reflections of shifting light. The fox lifted her head, ears twitching, sensing that something in the air had changed. Morning brought not only clarity, but also a subtle promise. Carefully, she stretched her limbs, testing her wounded leg. The pain remained, but it felt less sharp, tempered by rest, water, and time. She stepped forward cautiously, paws pressing into damp soil that now glowed faintly with sunrise. Each movement carried a blend of fragility and resilience. She moved along the stream bank, following the familiar path that curved gently through the forest. Around her, life awakened in layers. Insects hummed above the water. Small mammals darted through undergrowth, and distant branches trembled with the passage of unseen creatures. The wilderness pulsed with quiet vitality. At a bend in the stream, the forest opened slightly, revealing a clearing drenched in soft morning light. Here, the air felt different, warmer, gentler, almost welcoming. The fox paused, inhaling deeply, as if recognizing a place that held meaning beyond simple geography. In that moment, a faint sound reached her ears. Not the rustle of animals, nor the whisper of wind, but something familiar from the day before. Across the clearing, a human figure stood at the edge of the trees, just as still as during their first encounter. They did not approach. They did not speak. They simply observed. The fox remained where she was. There was no panic, no rush to flee. Instead, she studied the distant silhouette with the same quiet curiosity that had flickered within her earlier. Between them stretched a space filled with unspoken understanding, fragile yet profound. Minutes passed like slow heartbeats. Sunlight filtered through branches, painting patterns across the ground and across the fox's red fur. The human shifted slightly, but only enough to show continued respect for the animal's boundaries. Neither crossed the invisible line that separated their worlds. Then, as if guided by instinct rather than intention, the fox turned and stepped back toward the forest's shadows. Not in fear, but in choice. She moved with calm confidence, disappearing gradually among the trees, leaving only faint paw prints in the wet earth behind her. Alone once more, the human watched the clearing return to stillness. The forest breathed, the stream flowed, and the morning light glowed quietly above. Somewhere deep within the trees, the fox continued her journey, wounded, changed, but alive, carrying with her the memory of an unlikely encounter, and the quiet truth that some connections endure beyond time, distance, and species. In the end, this was never simply a story about an injured fox or a silent human in a misty forest. It was a quiet reminder that the wild world speaks in gestures rather than words, in glances rather than explanations, and in returns rather than goodbyes. The fox carried her wounds as proof of survival, but she also carried something less visible, a memory of an encounter that did not seek to dominate, but to witness. The forest, eternal and patient, held this moment within its trees, breathing it into the wind long after both figures had gone. Time will continue to shape the landscape, healing some scars and deepening others. Seasons will pass, rain will fall, and countless animals will cross the same hidden trails. Yet somewhere in that cycle, the echo of this meeting remains, a fragile thread connecting two worlds that rarely touch. It suggests that compassion can exist without control, and that respect can create bonds stronger than fear. As dawn fades into day, and the forest returns to its endless rhythm, the fox moves forward into the shadows, changed but alive. And we, watching from afar, are left with a lingering truth, that sometimes the most powerful stories are not about rescue or conquest, but about presence, memory, and the quiet miracle of returning.